It's Janet Fitch, and Writing Wednesday was postponed this week because I did a live um, virtual book club for my last book, The Revolution of Marina M. Getting ready for this week, this Tuesday, will be the release of my new book, Chimes of a Lost Cathedral, which I just happen to have here. So Tuesday, Chimes of the Lost Cathedral came out, so I did a virtual book club, and it's on my author page, as this thing is. So if you want to go back, if you've read the book, there's a lot of spoilers because it was a book club. But getting people ready for, their memories recharge for the new book. However, if you haven't read the new book, the first book, some people are rebels and they just want to jump in, or if it's been a long time, there is a cast of characters and sort of an update of where we are in the story at the beginning of the book. So awesome. And I'm a little excited about that. But I didn't want to miss Writing Wednesday, so I moved it to Saturday. And what I do on Writing Wednesdays, if this is the first time you've ever seen us, is I answer writer questions. Why do I do this? I did a recent interview asking me why I do this every week. I go up on Wednesday at noon Pacific and 3 Eastern, and I talk about writing. And the question from the interviewer was, why do you do this? Nobody wants me to, necessarily has asked me to do it. But I had such a hard time getting a start as a young writer that anything I can do to make it a little easier for people who maybe aren't doing an MFA program, they're very expensive, and would like to, have the information that I wished I had 20 years ago. So this is just my gift to the universe, and anybody who wants to learn a little bit more about writing, and it's free to ask me questions. Sometimes I lecture. So this is Writing Wednesday on Saturday. I know it makes no sense, but it was just postponed. So here are some questions, and I'm the people watching, I am happy to take your questions. So just type them in. I'll see them on the screen and answer them as best I can. All right, here it goes. So my first question had been, as a writer, should you try and get excerpts of your book or novel published before you try to publish your book? I want to submit extracts to competitions, but I'm afraid it might cause issues later on if I ever try to publish it. No, it's not a problem. A lot of very well-published novels have been excerpted, short stories excerpted in literary journals. While the person was writing it, they sectioned off a piece of it, put an introduction and a conclusion, made it more like a story, and published it. So do not worry about that. I think one of the things that new writers, hi Sophia, I think one of the things that new writers worry about is protecting the story. People are going to steal it. People are going to do this. If you publish a piece, a short story or an excerpt of the longer work, that it's going to make it more difficult to sell, and that is not true. In fact, it works the other way around. The more people who see a piece of that novel, the more likely that somebody, because people in publishing are always, and agents are always looking at the journals to see who's good and what's interesting coming out. And there's more of a chance that they will see you. Now, I am not particularly big on contests because they make all these hesitations in the writer's mind. I mean, if you want to go for a contest, go for it. But I think publishing pieces of it as short stories in lit mags, the literary magazines, is a wonderful idea. And why wouldn't you want to do that? So I would definitely say go for that. Here's another one. How do writers create different voices for fictional characters? We've talked a lot about voice in other character-related Writing Wednesday videos. You might want to go back on the page and see what else is there, but very in short. Every character is physically different. Their temperament is different, their energy level is different, their educational level is different, their attitude on the world is different. So if you really are feeling that character, you've really gotten them, the dialogue will always reflect who they are. Somebody who's vigorous has a more assertive way of speaking. It's a stronger voice. It doesn't trail off. It doesn't gasp for air. You can hear how strong or weak a character is in their dialogue, how educated they are, all that stuff. So that's how you create different voices for fictional characters. What do they do for a living? Somebody who works the racetrack is going to have a different set of metaphors than a plumber. They're going to describe a tough situation as, a horse that chews on its corral, as opposed to a clog of hair in a toilet. So what they do changes who they are. It changes the dialogue. What their temperament is like. Are they indecisive? Are they kind of vague? They would trail off. Often frequent apologies. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Poe, look at that dialogue. Or that writing. I mean, he has got crazy people, and who are like want to tell you but don't want to tell you. So they tell you but they keep you away from the subject by adding dependent clauses to the beginnings of the sentences and keep pushing you away from the edge. As much as they want to tell you, they contradict themselves. So we've talked a lot about dialogue. Take a look at some of the other videos. Here's one from Annabelle. Cool. Is it a good idea to hire an editor before I submit a novel to an agent? Or should I wait and then work with an editor via the agent? What you will end up doing in the process is getting that book as good as you can, which is, I don't know if you have a writing group. Most people, I certainly work with a writer's group. And boy, when they're happy with something, I don't need to get an outside editor. So I would just say use what you've got. If you have insoluble problems, you love the book, but you just can't see a way to solve that problem, you might want to investigate a hired gun, a hired editor, but they are not cheap. You're going to be looking at $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for such a creature. So if you can get it as good as you can, and your readers, I want you to start using other people. If your readers are saying, yeah, that's done, babe, is that good? Then send it to an agent. Send it to many agents, not just one at a time. Figure out who you're sending it to and send it out. And many an agent will take it and say, I would love to represent this, but this is not done yet. And you need to do this, that, this, and this. And if you cannot do it, you have to weigh whether you think they're right. And if they are and you're having trouble with it, maybe that would be a point to hire an editor. So there are many points in the process, but I would say get it as good as you can. If you still feel it's not good enough, you might investigate an editor. Hi, guys. Hi. Let's see what we have here. When researching a novel, how is one so sure the supposed meaning behind it and its contents was actually intended by the editor? So that's a reader question about the process. how can a reader be sure that they really have understood what the writer intends? Well, I would not have too much anxiety about that, because a book goes out into the world. The writer stuffs it, and they finally get the lid on it. And then the reader opens it, and everything opens up. And the reader completes the book by reading it, and then bringing their own experiences, their own ideas, their own visualizations to the book, and creates it anew in their head. So the reader is your partner as a writer. If you turn this around as a writer question, the reader is going to visualize it their own way. And as a writer, I feel I'd rather honor what people envision than necessarily tell them what I have in mind. That's the danger of writers doing book clubs with the readers, and readers say, well, what did you intend by this? It's like, it doesn't matter. I have a cousin who believes that, I wonder if she's watching. I have a cousin who believes that Ingrid didn't really kill Barry in White Oleander. She just, because she's such an egotist, she thought she did. Well, I'm not going to say, my feelings about that, because she's creating her own book, and everyone creates their own book. And if you're a writer, I try not to contradict people in their feelings about the book and the way they create it in their heads. I think it's much more interesting what they come up with. I bet this is a student and, is unsure about their own interpretation of the book. Don't be unsure. You're the reader, you're the co-creator, go for it. Let's see, anybody else have a question? Okay. I have written books of poetry and they're self-published. Is that good for an agent to look at to get published as well? Poetry is an entirely different market, and traditionally, poets have published their own stuff. So I don't know how poetry publishers feel about self-published books. I imagine that they're quite sympathetic. Agents, an agent is a salesperson. An agent looks at your work and goes, can I make money off of this? So generally, there's not a lot of money in poetry. So generally, there is not an agent involved in selling poetry, which, is not necessarily the case with fiction. So I don't think it makes any difference. Unless you got really good reviews. If it was self-published, then, that will be a vote in your favor. Let's see. All right, I've got some more questions here. As a writer, what aids for editing do you find the most helpful? And why? Now, aids to editing. I hope this doesn't mean Grammarly and all those online things. If your command of writing isn't strong enough to be fairly confident in your own, the way you want to handle grammar, the way you want to handle that kind of stuff, you're better off boning up, or just go for it. But editing aids, I'm trying to even imagine what that might be. There are techniques. One of them is to realize that it's never done until it's done, and the editing process is a creative process as well. So instead of feeling, oh God, I've got to edit this thing and it's all done and now comes the grunt work, it's no. It continues to be a creative process all the way through. So bring that joy, bring that discovery, bring that, to the challenge of editing. One of the things I do is I make a list of kind of the levels of things I'm going to be checking for. I don't do it all at once. So the first level is usually smooth, ease of reading. Am I stumbling over anything? Then the second read would probably be for the sensuality of it. Do I know where I am? Are there I make a list. Smell, sounds, colors, day and night, weather, temperature. And I read through and it's like, is the world, a visceral world? Sometimes you get so intense on trying to figure out what happens between your characters, you forget to do, create a sensual world. Are the 3 layers of landscape there? Do characters touch things? And then do we move out to the big picture, in and out? Am I creating a dimensional world? So, and then I will do an edit for just language. Is there word repetition? Are there better words than I've chosen? Have I used, in this section, have I used a similar sentence structure all the way through? Do I need to break it up? Do I need big ones, little ones? Do I need to wrench the language around? So you can see, so you could probably call that an editing aid or technique, is to go through looking for certain things and watch the overused verbs, the terrible 20, and really think about specifics. How specific can you be? And how melodic can you be? Read it out loud. That's the last thing. Read out loud. Is there music? If there's no music, make the music, So here's one. Heather, have you ever considered adding a part 2 to White Oleander? Oh my goodness. I'm sure there's so many people are curious to what Astrid is up to these days. That is so interesting. Somebody else has asked me. Never say never, but generally there's so much to think about and write about. There's so much that you want to engage with in the world as a writer that I feel like I'm done. That White Oleander is a thing of itself. And I probably will, it'll probably remain that way. The only thing I could see is doing a Ingrid story, doing a prequel, like why the hell is she the way she is? I think that's more likely than coming to Astrid as an adult. I think she knows who she is and what she's doing. Well, this brings up a question that Jeffrey, if you're watching, that Jeffrey asked, are you open to the idea of crossover stories? Would Astrid or Ingrid ever cross paths with Josie? Or another character, Lori? How about Rena Grushenko crossing paths with Lola? The Painted Black, White Oleander. Which is a really interesting question because I've seen that in books where a character appears like a minor flicker and then they're in the next book or in 2 books, or they interact with somebody. That's kind of cool. I think, but when I'm finished with a character's world, I really tend to be finished with that. Yet I could see an older Marina in Carmel in the 60s running into, or Ingrid coming down from Berkeley and interacting with a 60-year-old Marina, 65. That could be pretty interesting. So never say never. Never, ever say never about anything. That's life. Just the thing that you say you'll never do is the thing you end up doing. So who knows? So Jeffrey had another question. I know that Ingrid was originally the main character of White Oleander. Yeah, there was no Astrid. the first short story. Would you ever consider releasing it to the general public? That short story is in a journal called Black Warrior Review out of Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So it was published in, I think it was 95. And it was a short story. No, it's before that. That had Astrid in it. I don't think it was that good a story. I think it needed Astrid to be a really fine story. I don't know if I would. Maybe I could, if I could find it, I might put it on my website in the White Oleander section. And question 3. Before White Oleander, back when you were just writing short stories, is there one that you've considered expanding into a full-fledged novel? Well, Paint It Black was a short story that was expanded into a novel. That's a very likely thing. White Oleander was a short story expanded into a novel. Marina M. was a short story called Room 721 in Black Clock that I didn't actually write the story. I wrote the backstory, which became The Revolution of Marina M. and Chimes of Lost Cathedral. So got a lot out of that story. So I'm writing short stories again. I'm writing a noir story and I'm writing a sci-fi story. So who knows if I might end up writing a novel, a noir novel. I kind of like that. I like noir. So here's Shona. I wrote 2 books traditionally published in HarperCollins, and they've done well. Now I'm suddenly paralyzed. Oh, I'm so sorry. I moved cross country, and a whole year has gone by. Oh, I find I'm out of my comfort zone. Is your writing space sacred, or can you write anywhere? I have written every book in this actual seat that I'm sitting in right now. I built the bookcases later, but except for early short stories, I have written everything here. I do, when I can't write, I do go other places, but I gotta say, I come back here to do the serious concentration work. So I don't think it's sacred. I'm really, I try not to be ritualistic or, too precious about where I work. I've certainly worked in other places, but there's something about having all your books around you and to really be able to, for me, really be able to settle in. I think, creating a soft space for yourself, even if it's not forever. If you're living somewhere new, of really sitting in that chair hour after hour after hour, read in that chair, eat your lunch in that chair, really start spreading your psychic ambiance in that place. Do some meditation, get pictures of your favorite like the authors who are sort of, you think of as your tutelary spirits, and sit on the floor and contact them, and welcome them into your new space. I mean, I'm pretty the space is really important to me. I think if I moved, I'd be doing that same thing in the new space, kind of preparing it for the work, but not in a superstitious way, just as something that I don't know if anybody is into astrology, and I know a lot of people who hate that kind of stuff, so if you are, don't judge me. But I'm a fixed sign, which means I have trouble when I'm moving around. I do like to feel settled to work. So I get a lot of information when I'm traveling. I do research when I'm traveling, but I tend to really get down into it when I am at home. So here's another one from Amanda about the way, thank you, the amazing way I set the tone in the beginning of White Oleander. Can you speak about setting the tone in a novel? Very, very important. People take too much from short story writing and movies, which, you know, have to start on a dime. You're like, and you're all of a sudden in medias res, you know, you just begin. With a novel, you don't have to get off the blocks like that. With a novel, you want to signal to the reader that that they're entering a world. And you want to bring them, at least I want to bring the reader into a world. I want to set a mood so they kind of know what book they're going to be reading. You know, I think of it as constructing a doorway and then entering the doorway. So I do not believe that you have to get off the blocks that quickly. You know, that's short story stuff. You don't need to do that. It shows a lack of confidence that the reader will join you and that they'll have a little patience to watch it unfold for themselves. Now, by page 50, you better have something going on. But you want to start off and bring the reader into the world. To me, that's very important. I did that. I even have a prologue for Marina M. because I wanted to seeing it's a Russian novel written for Americans, I started in America and then brought you into Russia, into her past, so that the reader can really be located and understand that the narrative voice is going to take care of them, that they're not going to be lost, and then allow the world of Marina to open up. So I think that is super important. You're establishing your diction, you're establishing point of view, you're doing quite a bit of stuff at the beginning of a novel. And I think it's putting out the welcome mat for the reader. So here's another one. How do you, as a writer, how much of your world building never makes it into the story proper? Now, this is a sci-fi. I think this is about a sci-fi writer asking about world building. But all novels are world building. You create even if I'm writing contemporary world, I'm gonna, what part of the world am I dealing with? What are the rules of that part of the world? Am I writing about, Skid Row, LA, 2019? Am I writing about suburban Cincinnati in 1990, wife swapping and, that kind of thing? Is it an angry divorced household with a lot of secrets? Is it a marriage that looks good at the beginning? You're always world building. So, and the thing that I'm very careful is I ask myself, what does the character, especially working historically or sci-fi, or especially those two worlds that aren't our world, what is the character, how does the character see, what do they notice and what don't they notice? One of the things I think is something I really dislike about not bad, but historical writing that is not to my taste, let's just put it that way, is that the background becomes foreground. They are so interested in how, in this car and that telephone and how it works, and explaining to you how it works, and they're showing all their research. But a character from that time wouldn't be thinking about that. So you have to put yourself as if the novel, say historical, is being told from the point of view of somebody living at that time. And what would they notice? Story is foreground. all that stuff is background, and I believe the same should be true of science fiction, that you should talk about, the robo-health. I'm writing this sci-fi story, you write about, people getting checked with robo-health. You don't have to sit there and explain how it works. You have to figure it out. That's what this writer is asking. Yes, you have to do all that work of world building, but you only show enough that it makes sense to the reader, and it's stuff that it's being taken for granted by the character. Nobody, I also call it, it's like those movies that are historical and they kind of lick the scenery. It's like, look at that period this and that period that. And it's like, but that's not how people would see it in those days. So you want to write it as if it was written by the, in those days. What would they notice and what would they not? So yes, how much of world building that doesn't make it about 90%, doesn't make it, but it gives it, what it does is it gives it consistency, because that world, the rules, so everything is going to be consistent. The reader's not going to go, hey, wasn't that called video health? What is this robo health? You can't contradict yourself, so you have to know it very well, and then the consistency will be good, and the reader has a sense of confidence that that this is a real place. It's a real place. And that the writer if you don't know, or if you're still licking the scenery, if you're still excited about what you just researched, got to cook it a little longer. What else can I? Okay, here's one. When writing characters with disabilities, should you mention the disability when first introducing the character? Really good question. Oh my God. How do I make sure to introduce them respectfully? Well, it's different if you're in first or third. If you're in an omniscient point of view where you, the writer, have to say things, versus a close third or a first-person point of view. If you have a character who is, say, blind, and if you want to have the reader understand that they're blind without saying, God, I'm so sick of being blind, or Harry was, had been sighted as a child, but now he was completely blind. There's so much more subtle writerly ways to do that. Somebody who's losing their vision, you put the paper far and close and finally just threw it down. It's like he'll get Mabel to read it to him later. Clearly somebody whose vision is not good. They stumble over stuff, He only saw the vague outlines of that whatever. So it's a lot like world building. You want to know very clearly what it's like, and then just give little pieces of reality about it, rather than declarative statements about it. What is it like to live as a disabled person? Charlie wheeled up to the curb. In this town, they still didn't have cut curbs. It was like going back to 1962. His arms ached, blah, 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 and having to ask somebody to help you. So the deeper you are into the character, the more natural this will be. This is not a disability walking around. This is a person walking around with limitations and frustrations and anxieties and desires, just like everybody else. All right. Anything else from you guys? Hi, Zunaid. Greetings from South Africa. Okay, very cool. So I'm taking questions. Here we go. Is there a book that uses first-person narration, but splits it among 2 or 3 characters. Yes, absolutely. The Poisonwood Bible, there's like 7 of them. You just make it clear who. Sometimes people will just say Ruth, Leah. And then sometimes just the voice is so clear who it is that you don't need to even identify it that way, which is the best of all possible worlds. It's like clearly the stammering, hesitant, apologetic, denying, lying character, maybe. Oh, that's Charlie. And then the more abrupt, cut to the chase person is, oh yeah, that's Jason. But yes, that happens all the time. And it's very fun. It's very fun to read. I really enjoy that. Let's see what we have here. Another one. What is your favorite novel set in a single day? Well, my favorite novel set in a single day is Ulysses by James Joyce, set in a single day. 3 main characters, two main characters, and then one thrown in. Leopold Bloom, Stephen Dedalus, who is the younger man and is the alter ego of Joyce. Leopold Bloom is a middle-aged man who sells classified advertising for paper, and he's a very kind and generous person, but he's kind of bumbling through life. And then his somewhat adulterous wife, Molly, who gets the last chapter, and that's the best one. But every chapter in this book takes place on one day. It's June 16th. It's called Bloomsday, and it's a big holiday in Ireland now. Ireland, who didn't accept Joyce when he was alive. He had to leave the country and write this in France. But now, it's a holiday. I mean, to go to Ireland, to be in Dublin on Bloomsday, is something I've always wanted. So that takes place, and there's a different voice and time of day in each chapter, whole different language, diction, everything, and it follows the Odyssey. And so each chapter is a section of the Odyssey lived out on a single day in Dublin in 1904 or 1906. So that is probably the most brilliant. Also, there's everybody who's been watching me knows that Under the Volcano is one of my very favorite books by Malcolm Lowry. Takes place on the Day of the Dead in 1938, as the British consul drinks himself to death on the Day of the Dead. What a brilliant book. And that's a musical book. It's all about these amazing images which build as they recur into this motival structure that is, it's peerless. And then there's a Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich, which is a day in the life of a prisoner in the Gulag in Russia. And he also wrote the Gulag Archipelago. It's Solzhenitsyn, which is, there are 2 books, like 800 pages each, about the atrocities of the Gulag. But in a really short book, Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich is probably under 100 pages, if not, maybe 100 pages. But you become so closely invested in this one person's day and all the struggle for existence, this one guy, that to the point where he gets a fish head in his soup, and you celebrate with him because he got a fish head. So those are 3 novels set on a single day that I think are tremendous. But if you have a favorite, do write them in the comments, because I'd love to see what your favorite single day novels are. So yeah, I've used up my questions. So if you have any more questions, I will sit here for a second and tell you what's going on with me. And I'm prepared to take another question or two. So what's happening with me? Writing Wednesday will be irregular for the next month or so. I have I'm going to be away teaching for 2 weeks, so I'll fit it in when I can, and depending on the internet, when I actually can. And on the 2nd, on Tuesday, is opening day for Chimes of the Lost Cathedral. So if you enjoy these Writing Wednesday videos, buy my book. That'd be awesome. And then my book tour starts on the 16th. And on my website there, and also on Facebook, my tour is there. And if you'd like to, if you want to come out and support me or say hi, I would love to see you there. And if you can't make it to a reading, if you live in some part of the country that's far from where I'll be, you can contact any of the bookstores that I'll be reading at. Buy a book, I'll sign it for you, they'll send it to you, because there's still a post office, thank God. So in any case, I wish you good writing, I wish you good summer, and we'll see you next week. Bye. Oh, wonderful. Okay, bye.